Cole Kmet's name keeps coming up in trade rumors after the Miami Dolphins and Pittsburgh Steelers pulled off a blockbuster deal. But don't worry, the Chicago Bears aren't going to be trading their starting tight end anytime soon.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on the show today, I want to touch on the trade speculation surrounding Cole Kmet and why that's not happening, at least not right now, not before week one, and really at the earliest, the trade deadline this year, and most likely the earliest is really next offseason before any potential Cole Kmet deal might actually happen. Also not going to happen, a TJ Watt trade, the latest big-name edge rusher floated around there that Chicago Bears fans are salivating over the possibility of adding him to the Chicago defensive line. That'd be a much needed boost, but that deal's not going to happen either. But I do think if the Bears aren't going to be aggressive off the field in some of these moves, they may end up being a bit more aggressive on the field this season. And I want to explore where we might see that from Ben Johnson and how much of that will carry over from what he saw Dan Campbell do with the Detroit Lions. But let's start with the Bears player whose name has been, I don't even want to say implicated, but just floated out there, speculated upon in trade rumors in the sort of ripple effects of the Pittsburgh Steelers trading Minkah Fitzpatrick to the Miami Dolphins for Jalen Ramsey and tight end Jonnu Smith, because immediately after that big blockbuster trade, it was reported that the Miami Dolphins are now looking for a new tight end after trading Jonnu Smith away to the Steelers. Their tight end depth is pretty horrendous, and they absolutely need some kind of something to boost their tight end room right now. And so, okay, then everybody looks around and says, which tight ends might be available? And unsurprisingly then, people start throwing Cole Kmet's name out there. And it's worth noting that no one has reported that the Bears are trying to trade Cole Kmet. No one has reported that the Dolphins have contacted the Bears about Cole Kmet, right? There's nothing has actually happened here with any real legs to a Cole Kmet trade, right? This is all just people speculating and spitballing and throwing names out there that might make some sense hypothetically. But that's all this is at this point, is hypotheticals. But we all kind of understand why Cole Kmet's name comes up in these conversations. I think it's reasonable for us to expect that at some point in the next 2 or 3 seasons, like before Cole Kmet's current contract is up, it is likely that he will be traded to another team. He's under contract with the Bears through 2027 after the contract extension they signed him to last year. But when you draft Colston Loveland in the first round, that puts the writing on the wall that eventually, at some point down the line, Cole Kmet seems like someone who will be traded. But right now, just a couple months removed from the NFL draft, is not that time. The Bears are not trading Cole Kmet right now. And I don't think there's any possibility they trade him even before week one of this season, and mostly because Colston Loveland is injured. Colston Loveland has yet to participate in practice as a member of the Chicago Bears. And that is far too risky to move on from a player like Cole Kmet before you even see what Colston Loveland is capable of for his rookie season. Like it's such a wild card of not necessarily of like what he could become for his career, although that's even an unknown too, but just like what is he going to be able to even give you in year one? Not every tight end comes in and has a Brock Bowers first year. Sometimes it's a little bit of a slower start. And Cole Kmet is still your number one tight end for the Bears this season. So to me, like the absolute best case scenario, earliest that they could feel any kind of comfort with trading Cole Kmet, I think would be at the NFL trade deadline, kind of like what the Lions did with TJ Hawkinson in 2022, trading him to the Minnesota Vikings. But like, that would only be if Colston Loveland is ready to go week one and thrives and dominates and looks like he's ready to take over the tight end one role right away. Realistically, we're going to see the Bears go through this entire first season, 2025, with both Cole Kmet and Colston Loveland. And then next offseason is when the Cole Kmet trade talks might heat up a bit more. This is the last year of Cole Kmet's contract where he really has like guaranteed money locked into the deal. After 2025, you get into 2026, his cap hit stays the same. It's $11.6 million every year. But his salary isn't guaranteed in 2026 or 2027. So all you're really left with is a $1.6 million prorated signing bonus each and every year remaining, spread out over his deal. There's a couple of roster bonuses and workout bonuses in there. But for the most part, his contract is easy for the Bears to get out of after this year. A little bit more tricky this year because you end up spreading some of the guaranteed money out, so it's going to cost you more money. Against next year's salary cap, there's some complicated salary cap machinations where financially they probably could afford to trade him right now. But again, realistically, it's just not the time and place. Like, this is a Bears team that wants to win and contend and push for the playoffs. So why are you trading away a potentially valuable weapon for your offense and for your young quarterback? Like, at the end of the day, priority number one is still like developing Caleb Williams, and having two great tight ends is more beneficial than having one great tight end. And even then, you're not sure, is Colston Loveland going to be a great tight end right away in year one, or is it going to take a little bit more time? Like, I could understand if somehow you're trading Cole Kmet to then upgrade a different position where you might have a bigger need and kind of take a surplus at tight end and use that to get a better pass rusher or wherever else you might want to try and upgrade, heaven forbid, a running back or something in there. But like, that's not likely to happen at this point. Cole Kmet's a leader of this Bears offense. They want everyone to be involved and build that chemistry. He already has some existing chemistry with Caleb Williams. There's just no real possibility here of a Cole Kmet trade happening right away or anytime soon for the Bears. In the future, absolutely. Right now, not so much. So hopefully we can put a rest to some of these, again, speculation. It's not even reports or real legs behind any of it. It's just throwing names out there. I think there's there's a handful of other tight ends around the NFL that feel like a lot more potentially realistic trade options out there for a team like the Dolphins or any other tight end needy team that is not going to be Cole Kmet and where the Bears stand right now. Not the only Bears trade speculation, though, that has come out of the Steelers-Dolphins blockbuster, because when they make those big moves, then everyone's looking at what other big moves are these teams going to make. And so now Bears fans have shifted their attention from trading for pass rusher Trey Hendrickson from the Bengals to now trying to trade for pass rusher TJ Watt from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Watt is just as unrealistic, if not even more unrealistic, for a lot of the same reasons as Trey Hendrickson that we'll go through next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Do you wish managing your money felt a little bit easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. I have the Monarch Money app on my phone, and I use it almost every day because it's more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. That's my favorite part about it, right? Because before, I have an app for my checking account with my credit union. I have an app for my credit card account. I've got an app for my retirement account and an app for my investments. And I have to sign into each one individually to kind of check on how my financial picture looks. But they're all connected through my Monarch Money app in one place. So in addition to just managing your money, you can also really start building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for for half off your first year. So Cole Kmet not going anywhere yet. In the future, perhaps. Now, not yet. Not going anywhere from the Chicago Bears. And the same thing seems to be true for TJ Watt of the Pittsburgh Steelers. The latest of the big name pass rushers to enter, well, and he's been in the trade speculation realm. And ESPN's Adam Schefter added some more fuel to this fire after the Steelers, Dolphins, Ramsey, Fitzpatrick trade, not by saying anything that the Steelers are doing, but reiterating what other teams have said. Schefter tweeted, quote, "Sources in recent weeks, multiple teams have been discussing whether they can trade for Steelers standout TJ Watt, who skipped the team's most recent minicamp. Pittsburgh hasn't shown any willingness to deal Watt so far, but he's unhappy with his contractual situation, and sources believe outside team interest is likely to increase given today's trade." And I wanted to be careful to start with Schefter's wording there, because in theory, and not in reality, but in theory, that whole tweet and sentence should really put this whole thing to bed, right? Exactly what Adam Schefter said there. The Steelers have shown no willingness to trade TJ Watt. That has been the case all offseason and has not changed as a result of this trade. Like, they don't want to trade him. They have no interest in trading him. They're not going to let TJ Watt go anywhere. I would think, especially after making this trade for Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, right? When you think about what the Steelers have done, they're all in on winning right now. They have a 41-year-old quarterback. They have a 33-year-old wide receiver in Robert Woods. They trade for a 30-year-old Jalen Ramsey and a soon-to-be 30-year-old Jonnu Smith, and they signed a 34-year-old Darius Slay. This is an old Steelers roster that's all in on, hey, we got a short window to try and maximize right now, so let's try and win this year. And obviously, trading TJ Watt, even if you're getting some players in return, you're not getting TJ Watt back in return. And so trading TJ Watt would make the Pittsburgh Steelers worse. And they're not going to trade TJ Watt. They're probably still going to give him a contract extension, and this is all going to be wasted, trade speculation. And that's kind of why I wanted to get out in front of it and say, like, hey, this ain't happening from the Steelers side, and it's not happening from the Bears side either. Just like they can't afford to trade for Trey Hendrickson, they also currently cannot afford to trade for TJ Watt. Like, as it stands today, the Bears have roughly $14 or $15 million in salary cap space today. TJ Watt's current contract, which he wants a raise from, but his current contract would cost you $30 million per year. So just to trade for TJ Watt right now, the Bears would have to double their current salary cap space by, restructuring Montez Sweat and DJ Moore's contract, Jalen Johnson's contract. Maybe you cut somebody like Ryan Bates to try and save some salary cap space, or, whatever moves you try and make just to get enough money to get him in the building. Then you have to give him a massive contract extension and make him likely the highest paid pass rusher in football, if not, one of the highest paid pass rushers in football. And the Bears already have two of the highest paid pass rushers in football. You look at the current pass rusher market right now. Myles Garrett's getting $40 million a year. Danielle Hunter and Max Crosby's got new contracts to be over $35 million a year. But the Bears are paying Montez Sweat $24.5 a year, and Dayo Odengbo's getting $16 million a year. Though that is two of the top 25 highest paid edge rushers in football are already under contract for the Bears. And so if you tried to add TJ Watt and then give him a $35+ million a year contract to what the Bears are already spending, 24.5 and 16, that's 40. Right now the Bears are already spending $40 million a year on pass rushers, and you add another $30 million a year on pass rushers. They cannot afford that roster. They can't afford to then properly build out the rest of the team because you've sunken so much of your salary cap space into one position. Like right now, the Bears are spending $144 million on their entire defense. If somehow you traded for Watt and gave him a $35 million a year contract, like half of your defensive salary would be going to 3 players, 3 pass rushers. You have to fill in everything else without any money to spend. And also, as it stands right now, the Bears don't have enough money, salary cap space in the future for TJ Watt's contract extension. Like as of today, the Bears cap space next offseason, 2026, is negative $4.5 million. Currently, the Bears will have to shed salary in order to get under the cap next year before they can even start signing any free agents. And so if you traded for TJ Watt and gave him a contract extension, that would add another $35 million to your cap for next year. So you would be then, $40 million over the cap to start 2026. And of course, they may release Tremaine Edmonds and they might restructure some contracts here and there, and a couple other players, they can find some ways, release DeAndre Swift. Like there's going to be ways for them to save some money and get back under the salary cap, but it becomes that much more difficult to do anything else next offseason if you traded for and extended TJ Watt. Like it's the same financial restraints that we talk about with Trey Hendrickson, where you can't afford his current contract and you can't afford the contract he is looking for without completely mortgaging your financial flexibility and creating maximum amount of cap space to then have very, very little, close to zero space left to make any other moves in the future when it comes to trying to upgrade the running back position or trying to get more, trying to replace the linebacker spot with Tremaine Edmonds or trying to replace the safeties with Jaquan Brisker and Kevin Byard. Like the Bears need more pass rush right now, but they can't afford to sink a bunch of money into pass rush and then not be able to afford upgrades at other positions that are either currently needs or are going to be bigger and bigger needs as we get further into the future. So the Bears are just not in a position to make the big splash blockbuster move right now. Like Ryan Poles made his big aggressive moves already this offseason. He traded for Joe Thuney. He traded for Jonah Jackson. He signed Grady Jarrett and Drew Dahlman and Dio Odengba, right? Like that was the big push. That was the big splash. That was the big everything, right? Now you're set with the players that you have for the most part, right? A little bit of free agent wiggle room here or there, a veteran before training camp that's currently on the street, maybe, but like that's about it. And so this is the team you're going to live and die with here. The time for being aggressive is over. It's that he already made his moves, and this is the team that they're going to stick with. So I think off the field, the Bears are done being aggressive. But on the field, they could be a little bit more aggressive this upcoming season than what we saw them do under Matt Eberflus. Not just from a Dennis Allen defensive scheme standpoint, which is going to be a different kind of aggressiveness, but also just from a head coaching standpoint, from going forward on 4th downs and 2-point conversions and trick plays and all of the like pushing the envelope status here. Ben Johnson's coming from a super aggressive team in Detroit to a middle of the line aggressive team in Chicago. And I want to explore how much more the Bears might be aggressive this season than last season and how that kind of compares to the rest of the NFL next on Locked On Bears. Matt Eberflus came to the Chicago Bears with a reputation of being a very conservative coach, right? That we thought, Tampa 2 scheme, a little bit more of a easygoing, lighthearted guy. I don't want to say soft-spoken, but not high intensity, high energy, right? Like we've talked about this a lot in recent coaching searches, how the Bears don't like the high intensity, high energy guys. They tend to prefer the guys that don't rock the boat so much. And I do think, to Matt Eberflus's credit, he proved to be capable of being more of an aggressive head coach than I thought he would be, and that most of us thought he would be when he came in. But it doesn't mean he was overall like one of these super aggressive coaches, right? I think he was closer to middle of the pack, which is still better than we thought he'd be, like more bottom of the pack, but that's ultimately kind of where things line up. But then now you go to Ben Johnson, who I think is a little bit more fiery in general, but comes from a Detroit Lions team that was the Dan Campbell mentality of really going all out, being aggressive in kind of like every facet of life. I feel like there aren't very many things Dan Campbell doesn't do aggressively. Like he even drinks coffee aggressively. He's talked about like how many shots of espresso or whatever he does a day. Like he kind of does everything aggressively and intensely. And so I'm left wondering how much of that will rub off, or has, I guess, rubbed off on Ben Johnson, and then will translate and come with him to the Chicago Bears. Because I think Ben Johnson seems to be a little bit more, I don't want this to sound like an insult to Dan Campbell, but like pragmatic, someone who's maybe a little bit less like balls to the wall, we're going for it, and a little bit more like, let's be aggressive, but let's also be smart about when we're, I think there's like a little bit more of like, you talk about the angel and the devil on the shoulder. Like I think Dan Campbell's hearing from the devil on the shoulder a lot more, and Ben Johnson's getting a little bit more of the angel on the shoulder saying, hey, maybe not right now. That's kind of the vibe they give off. But the reason I bring this up is because the people over at RotoWire put together a little scoring system on how aggressive every team was last season. And essentially they took a few different categories and then kind of combined that into one ranking. So when they talk about aggressive, they look at fourth down attempts per game, 2-point conversion attempts per game, trick or fake plays per game, onside kicks attempted per game, and then also blitz percentage on defense. And they said they went through and eliminated attempts that were deemed necessary for a team to win the game. So like late in the fourth quarter, going for it on fourth down when you're down by a touchdown, like that doesn't count as being aggressive. That's like what you're supposed to do because you need it. Aggressive, I think they're looking at this as more like above and beyond and kind of pushing it in those situations. So you shouldn't be surprised to hear then that the Detroit Lions finished last season as the most aggressive team of any in the NFL. Like, no duh. Like Dan Campbell's reputation kind of speaks for itself. The Lions were kind of high octane in a lot of ways. They went for it on fourth down a lot. They faked punts even deep in their own territory. They attempted some onside kicks. And I think we assign a lot of that to Dan Campbell, but then that's the way Ben Johnson saw his head coach do it for the last 4 or 5 seasons. So is he going to come to Chicago and do more of that compared to what we saw last year? Well, under Matt Eberflus, the Bears ranked 18th in terms of aggressiveness here. The Lions were 1, Commanders 2, Bills 3, Eagles 4. Like, yeah, those kind of make a lot of sense. Bears down at 18, kind of around the Texans, Chargers, 49ers, Cardinals range. But I think what's interesting about this to me is that like 18th for the Bears is still ahead of the Packers, who are 24th, and the Vikings, who were down at 29. And I don't think of like Matt LaFleur or Kevin O'Connell as like particularly quote unquote conservative coaches. Like you had the Cowboys were at 32 with Mike McCarthy. Like that makes sense, right? Conservative old school coach doesn't go for it a lot on fourth downs and 2-point conversions and stuff like that one. And even Mike Tomlin at 30, like those kind of make sense. But the Vikings at 29, I don't think of Kevin O'Connell as like a scared to put the pedal to the metal kind of coach. Like it feels like he and Matt LaFleur and Ben Johnson are similar types of offensive thinking coaches that you'd think would want to go for it more. But I think the way to think about this, especially for Minnesota, is that their defense was so good last season and it was generating a lot of takeaways and turnovers and big plays, big sacks, that they didn't need to be aggressive on offense because their defense was so good. And also they wanted to protect Sam Darnold a little bit and not ask him to have to do so much and put him in the position to pressure to go for it on fourth down and to go for 2-point conversions and to fake stuff on your own territory, right? Like they were more willing to kind of let their defense do the work. And that doesn't necessarily mean Kevin O'Connell is now some super conservative coach, but it was more just like letting the game come to them a little bit more and not needing to push the envelope. And so I wonder then where that leaves Ben Johnson. Because on the one hand, you've got a quarterback and wide receiver weapons and tight end weapons and an improved offensive line to where you should be able to be more aggressive on fourth down and on 2-point conversions perhaps than what Matt Eberflus was doing. Although Eberflus went for it on fourth down a decent amount, but maybe more trick plays. Ben Johnson certainly has a reputation for being able to pull out some of those and having some success with those. So, in theory, you think more of those. But then on the other side, you've got a Dennis Allen defense that's going to be more aggressive. and is going to play more man coverage and maybe going to blitz a little bit more, although I don't think of him as like a super, super heavy blitzing team, but there's going to be more blitzing, not a crazy amount more, but more blitzing. And so I think Ben Johnson's aggressiveness might be a little bit tied situationally to how the defense is doing, how the team is doing. It's if Caleb Williams and the offense is picking it up really quickly, well, then maybe you're cooking with gas and you say, hey, let's go for it. Let's keep this thing rolling. And if maybe the offense is, I don't want to say like slow to pick it up, but there's a learning curve. It's a new offense for everybody. They're not going to be a well-oiled machine right away in week one. And so if that's the case, maybe you say, hey, let's not put so much on Caleb Williams' shoulders right away. Let's run the ball more and rely on our defense and be a little bit more conservative of a team because you trust Dennis Allen and you trust this defense and you trust your running game and your offensive line. Like that's what Ben Johnson, we know, wants to run the football. As much as we think of like big plays, Detroit offense, etc., like running the ball is such a huge part of that. So maybe, especially early in the season, they run the ball more, they lower scoring games, relying on the defense, and they're not as aggressive of a team as what Dan Campbell was doing with the Detroit Lions with Ben Johnson there. But then maybe as you get later in the season, does the offense get more comfortable? Do you have players a little bit more knowledgeable of the playbook? And now you're ready to mix in some trick plays. Now you're ready to go for it backed up in your own territory because you trust a little bit more that everyone is going to execute exactly the way that they're supposed to because they've now done it for 10, 12, 15 games, as opposed to the first 2 or 3 games when everything is a lot newer and fresher there. So I don't think it's going to be this like super clear-cut identity of like we're always going to be aggressive and we're always going to go for it. But I think there's room for that to be a bigger and bigger part of the team as the season goes on, depending on how the defense progresses and depending on how the offense progresses. And I think Ben Johnson will be a little bit more, I don't want to say level-headed about it, but he's going to pick and choose his battles a little bit more, I think, than what he was used to in Detroit, and maybe find a happy medium between being super conservative and being super aggressive there. And I think he'll be aggressive when he needs to and then conservative when it makes a little bit more sense. And hopefully there's a little bit more rhyme or reason to it than sometimes Eberflus made some interesting decisions where they'd go for it sometimes and then they'd punt it sometimes when you thought they should go for it, and maybe they go for it when you thought maybe you should punt it, and they couldn't quite find a rhythm to those type of head coaching decisions. And that's one of the big things we still need to see Ben Johnson prove to us, is how he handles all of these sort of like head coach duty responsibilities, not just like, offensive play calling and game planning and scheming. We kind of are assuming he'll be pretty darn set at that, but it's calling timeouts, it's throwing challenge flags, it's when to punt, when to go for it, when to fake it, when to do the onside kick. Like those things are ultimately head coach decisions and things that Ben Johnson has never had to decide for himself, but he's seen now a variety of head coaches across Miami and Detroit decide those things. And I think he's talked in the past about he's seen a lot of things go wrong. He's seen a lot of mistakes in his previous stops that will help inform him of what not to do in those situations. But he's going to make some mistakes in those situations too, and he's got to learn from them, and ultimately we'll see kind of how he develops into that head coaching role. That's something that's going to be hard to really get much of a grasp for until he actually has to do it in like regular season games. But you can be sure we'll keep tabs on all of Ben Johnson's own development as a head coach all throughout the process right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen today, you can check out the Locked On NFL podcast. I co-host it on Tuesday mornings with Tyler Rowland, and we talked about this Dolphins Steelers trades on both sides and also other potential tight ends, including Cole Kmet, that could be available on the trade market. So go check out Locked On NFL. Make that your second listen today. Come on back on Thursday for another episode of Locked On Bears and another opportunity for you to bear down.